All right, great. Thanks, Dave. We'll go ahead and bring our fantastic panel out here, and we'll turn to them as quickly as possible. But I just wanted to start off with a couple of thoughts and a look backward, actually, to this event last year. I think it's really interesting. Dave, in kind of his intro setup, said, maybe the topic is not even how to measure digital better, it's how to measure digital at all. And then I think, Brad's remarks are probably emblematic for the thinking of a lot of people in digital that, hey, we're actually making fantastic progress, and this process of measuring digital is very far along. And I think that's been a debate in the industry for quite a while. And the foundation of that debate, I think, is this kind of principle-based argument that we'll talk about today. And in one camp, I think we've got a group of people who are thinking that, okay, the way to tackle digital is to put it into the context of other media, because ultimately, a digital investment is going to often involve some sort of share shift. So we have to understand how digital lines up, compares, and works with other media. And then in the other camp, you've probably got a group of people who would say, no, digital is a completely new thing. We've got all sorts of new data and metrics, and therefore we've got to tackle it in this new way rather than watering it down to the frameworks of traditional media. And that push and pull, I think, has kind of defined the conversation around measurement in digital for the past 15 years. So last year at this event, there was a lot of focus on the GRP in digital. And several companies were kind of very focused on introducing GRP measurements. I was at Nielsen at the time, so I was one of those, and I was sitting in the front of the audience feeling very proud of myself for my part in solving the digital problem with the introduction of the GRP. And the moderator actually polled the audience on what they thought about this tremendous breakthrough of bringing the GRP into digital, and this was the result. And what you can see is a much less than overwhelming amount of enthusiasm amongst this community for that GRP measurement. And I think that gets to the heart of that tension that we all see in the marketplace. So with that framework in mind, these are the issues that we want to tackle in this panel. We've got a fantastic group of individuals here. We have Terry Cohen, the SVP of Strategy and Analysis for Digitas. We have Andy Markowitz, the Director of Global Digital Strategy at GE. We have Gunnar Johnson, the Director of Ad Research at Google. And we have Brad Smallwood, the Head of Global Measurement for Facebook. And Brad, you gave us a lot of very compelling stuff to think about in your opening remarks. I think it's interesting. Facebook obviously has this massive amount of very, very unique data within its platform, and some of it can be traditional type of media usage data, but a lot of it is very new type of digital engagement data. It would appear that you guys, though, are mostly focused on telling your story in traditional terms with traditional media frameworks. And in fact, despite the fact that most of this data lives within your system, you've brought out that story to the marketplace through partnerships with third-party measurement firms. So just interested to know what drives that strategy.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's, I don't think it's our data or anything that's driving. It's actually just really about how marketing works, and I think Dave just talked about it. Any solution really comes down to you're trying to market to consumers. And ages and genders and the segment stuff that I was talking about, it's all about just putting messages in front of the right consumers, like putting great creative in front of them, and we know that that works. And it doesn't necessarily matter where they're consuming the media. You put messages in front of people, and you know that it leads to changes in online behavior, changes in offline behavior. And so when we think about it, it's not like we're trying to say, well, we want to match up with all the measures that have kind of been built in TV. It's just fundamentally like that's actually how marketing works. And so ages and genders, true, that's how TV is. You've got GRPs and TRPs, and that's how TV is bought. And we want to match up to those, but we recognize that over time, like some of that segment level stuff that we're talking about, more and more buying is going to happen in that kind of medium. But you start with kind of helping people think about consumers and how to deliver, to put messages in front of them with great creative and to control the frequency, that delivers ROI. And then we'll gradually get more and more detailed in kind of the ways that we target those messages. So
you've kind of conformed to a lot of those TV models initially, but you talk about in the future, maybe things move more to segment-based.
Yeah.
What happens to those TV models then, and what happens to TV?
Well, that's quite a question. I mean, from my perspective, I think that TV will actually start looking with addressable and over the top and all of that, is going to start increasingly looking a lot more like online, where you'll start, in some cases, start ad serving some of the things, doing exactly the same types of things that I was talking about with kind of segment level targeting. The dynamic or the way that you buy TV today is you buy television shows. If everybody was addressable, you wouldn't necessarily need to be buying television shows. You could be ad serving them very similar to the way that we do on online. And so, I mean, obviously this isn't something that's happening, next year, but when you look over time, I think you're going to see that type of dynamic happen as well. And, it would be the marketers that kind of help push that to happen.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So, Gunnar, it would seem at a surface analysis that Google has a pretty different approach. Google also sits on, vast treasure trove of very unique data, and most of what we've seen from Google from a measurement standpoint has been more of a focus on these new metrics, the new capabilities. Is that accurate, and what would drive that strategy?
Yeah, I think, Jonathan, what we're looking for is really to bring the best of what digital has to offer and do it in a way that is consistent with some of the other sources. I think, as Brad was mentioning, we're actually pretty consistent and similar in terms of our views and beliefs. A lot of those, we've obviously, as Google, we've grown up in a direct response heritage with just some great ways to optimize your campaign online through AdWords and things like Google Analytics. I think when we look at measurement in kind of the brand world, really what we've done is simplified our strategy to look at bringing kind of the best of digital in a brand response type function and really understand, advertising in the context of what the consumer sees with GRPs and now viewable impressions, what the consumer thinks in terms of ad engagement and brand lift, and ultimately what the consumer does in terms of signing up for a Google offer or using their Google Wallet to go purchase some things. We obviously have done that through a balance of developing our own best-of-breed platforms and tools that really allow both advertisers and publishers to optimize campaigns on the impression basis, on the fly, and really serve as currency in the marketplace. I think as we look at kind of the role of third parties, we've been actively working with third parties to try to improve really the publisher community to date that we feel has been, really underserved in the ability to optimize to an impression, to an audience, and really make changes on the fly, understanding your pacing and different applications there. So we've taken a best of kind of breed approach and leveraging, bringing the best of what digital has to offer, and working with the major players in the industry to try to improve third-party measurement as well.
In that model that you talk about of optimizing on the fly, always getting better, it's almost using the verification to plug directly back into the the decisioning and delivery, that's a model that sounds much more like search than traditional brand advertising. Is it informed by what you've learned in search? And
I think there's a lot of roots there, and just understanding, as Brad was mentioning, kind of the serving aspect of this, and really how we can leverage ad servers to help make smarter decisions. I think we definitely understand the concepts of reach and frequency and agree with those, but I think there's a much smarter way to go about this that ultimately works not only for digital, but as we look at the future, in the next 5 years, we see at least 50% of all ads being identified through something like an ad server and really be an addressable that offers that ability to not only target but optimize on the fly, and then really look at not only the campaign planning but the optimization really in a new cross-channel light.
And does optimization ever get so good that you don't need the measurement industry to verify what happened?
I think there's a lot of advances in real-time bidding and optimization. I think there's lots of algorithms. I think what it raises the need is to really understand and kind of improve, not only that advertising works, but really how to make it work better. And I really like the idea of kind of matching the right message to the right target to the right consumer,
Yep.
At the right time. And I think some of the new ways we're going to have the ability to drive those are really going to only see the need and rise of the media planning professional to leverage these new tools and systems.
Yeah, no, it's a big potential shift. So, Terry, you spend your time at Digitas sorting through all of these things, and Gunnar and Brad very politely say that they completely agree with me. It actually sounds like very different frameworks from my perspective sitting here. How do you make of these kind of different points of view, and do you see big progress being made in the
this
industry?
year? Well, I think this year was really the year of testing. We rolled out across multiple clients across all of Publicis, either using ComScore's, VCE, Nielsen's OCR. We tested GRPs and viewability this year, and it's definitely been an advancement. We've been able to get insights into how we're reaching across different platforms. The key challenge, though, is it's still now a challenge with understanding what's accurate, because we, in some cases, will run head-to-head tests and we'll get different numbers right now. So we're still at the point where we need to figure out what are additional types of testing we can do to be really comfortable with the data. But we are at the point where we have been able to work with broadcasters. There are some publishers or broadcasters that will guarantee reachability against the target, and we have, particularly in the upfronts, we have been able to negotiate based on GRPs. There are other situations where we're not necessarily negotiating yet, but we're reporting and we're optimizing and we're giving feedback back to the publishers, and they are making improvements. So it's really been quite a year for advancing in that particular area.
So it's interesting that 15 years into the industry, you call this past year as the year of testing. What was going on the previous 14 years?
Right. Well, then we were still translating impressions into GRPs. We've always been doing that. Now we have, a much greater ability to be able to get more accurate data about the demographics that we're reaching. So
can we interpret that to say that this past year has been a really meaningful year?
Yes, it's definitely been. Yeah, we're not. So we're basically at the point where we feel like we're not there yet, but we're made a lot of progress.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So Andy, we'll turn to you. At the end of the day, the reason all of this exists, all of this, is for you. It's to help you manage your investments and make decisions on how to spend your money. Does this resonate? How does this connect with what you guys are thinking about back in the war room?
So I make one assumption before I answer this question, that pretty much everyone in the room is smarter than I am on this stuff. So you take that for what it's worth, even though it says GE on my business card. From the digital perspective, I think what the fundamental precept that we have is that context changes everything. So to say that the context of a Google ad, of a Google search term, versus a Facebook ad, versus a TV ad, versus an ad delivered on a mobile device, or an outdoor ad, the context of all of those things is completely different. And so the premise of one measurement fits all is really kind of not worthwhile, from my point of view. From a digital perspective, the promise of digital to me is how do you marry data and how do you marry creative, which is addressable media, different types of dynamic ad serving and things like that. And what those things drive is behaviors. They drive critical actions that you want consumers or customers to take. And so I would think that, the better measurement is not up here where you interface, but what happens after the interface. And so I think, the critical component of it was summed up very well when a group of us went out to the YouTube labs in San Bruno, and, they have a very succinct statement, which is reach is cheap, but engagement is valuable. And I just thought we all thought that was a very succinct way of thinking about things in the context of digital. The problem that it creates is that TV is this unbelievably powerful medium and is not yet quite addressable and won't be in scale for a while, for a couple of years. And so the problem that it creates is that it holds different mediums to different kind of forms of accountability. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of the things that I think we struggle with, which is how do those things kind of connect to each other from the top of the funnel down to the bottom of the funnel. And I think it is incumbent upon brands to kind of take more of a strength, a position of strength in measuring that than relying necessarily on the value of a lot of syndicated research, because the context, the message, the customer set, the consumer set varies from message to message.
So that concept of that Brad talked about of TV starting to morph into something that becomes more of a digital platform, that certainly would potentially eliminate a lot of waste. If you have addressability, you're not delivering to people you don't care about. Does that change
I think
TV in other ways?
There's waste in TV. There is a lot of waste in digital, no question about it. There is waste in every platform. Are you going to get to a point where you can eliminate waste completely? I think we've all seen the movie Minority Report and have used that as an example, and when you get there, that'll be great. And until then, there's an assumption, which is, are you going to fight the battle of waste, which is a good battle to fight, or are you going to fight the battle of impact, or can you do both at the same time?
Yeah.
And I think that's that's clearly a challenge for us, and I think we want to do both, because the world of dollars doesn't go like that. The world of dollars contracts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So I think you have an obligation to figure out the impact of that more broadly.
Okay, good. Well, so I want to come back to those interactivity and engagement questions, because I think that's the meat of a lot of this. But let's first hit back on the GRP issue, because that has been such a big part of the story for the past year. How's it changed things for all of you guys? It existed before, as you said, Terry, but it's much more of a kind of movement now, it would seem. Mm-hmm. How's that changed the game, both on the sell side and on the buy side?
Well, as I mentioned, it's we are looking obviously to optimize the reach. We want to basically understand who we're reaching, and we are working closely with the publishers in order to be able to see what is delivering against this. So right now, some publishers actually they're also testing it as well. So they will say, we're going to run a test here, and they may not negotiate for it, but they may optimize against it. So it's still at the point where only a small percentage are actually buying and negotiating on it. We're still buying on impressions in digital, but we are using it to optimize. And the whole point is to be able to make sure we're delivering against our target.
Yeah, I just build on that. I think there definitely is a shift, and I think it's been brought to life through our brand marketers and really that use case and understanding kind of the served impression as currency to now an audience-based delivery currency. And I think, everybody realizes that's where the industry is going as we evolve. It's a big piece in connecting those dots. One of the things that's been a challenge is doing that in a way that, again, the publishers can optimize, can use to understand their pacing of the campaign, how do they forecast the impression, and switch things around on the fly if they're under-delivering. So when we have guarantees in the industry, that's something you can adjust to. And I think that's the piece that, we've been working with the major players. We've actually developed our own approach that we've released to the industry on how to exactly do that, and do that through a technique called data enrichment that we're actually about to file a patent on. And we've shared that with a lot of the folks in the industry. I think the running joke is it's a lot of math. I look at that as a real positive development and enabling that through the variety of different techniques to essentially improve that process, not only through panels, not only through census-based sources, but really the combination of all those stacks of information that ultimately make the ultimate audience delivering measurability a lot better.
Yeah, I think for us, the big change is that as we have these conversations about GRPs, exactly what you're saying is that the conversation is now about buying audiences and not impressions. And it'd be interesting if you would ask the audience here, not the question about whether GRPs are right, but does anybody believe that, like, if you were like a rational person, that impressions is the right measure? It's actually about delivering audiences. That's what marketing is clearly about. And impressions were a surrogate from way back. Honestly, I've been in this industry for a long time, so maybe I'm to blame for it. But way back, impressions became the currency, but it doesn't actually make logical sense. It's about delivering audiences. And what GRPs did for TV is they allowed people to actually start thinking a lot more around audiences, and TRPs in particular allow you to think around audiences. That's what I think this conversation has kind of helped move forward for online. And yes, there are a lot more opportunities that we can get people to be focused on audiences, and we can go deeper than just demo-based audiences, but we've at least started that conversation, which I think is really exciting. And then, going to guarantees and going to all that, all that's kind of good, but we're at least have the conversation about metrics that's about what matters for marketers, not this kind of impression thing.
Exactly.
Great. So the other big story last year was viewability, and that one kind of came out of nowhere. Just all of a sudden emerged as this big story that was somehow tied into the GRP and the waste and the efficiency issue. Is that done now? Are we there yet, or are we just at the start of the journey on viewability?
I could take that. So Digitas was part of the 3MS pilot, and back in September they released the first results of the study, and we're making progress, but we're certainly not there yet. There are definitely some issues that came out of that, things like cross-domain iframes, certain browsers making it difficult to measure viewability. So, and in fact, in November, the MRC issued an advisory that it's premature right now still to try to negotiate based on viewability, since we still need to improve some of the ways that we're actually measuring. And so they've initiated this SafeFrame pilot. So in the meantime, though, we've still been tracking it and measuring it. And since it is premature to do the actual negotiations on it, we are, however, reporting and monitoring and working with some publishers. So in one case, we had a publisher, and we were seeing, it was reported at something low, like a 20% viewable, and that publisher, was in there, they wanted to get it back up as well, and we got the numbers much higher working with them. So, this year it's been helpful to work on it, but it's still at the point where it's not valid yet. We need to wait for, these additional solutions that are out there, and also need to look at the new ad formats, the new IAB Rising Stars, and some of those may have even a different definition. The current definition of 50% viewable, and whether or not that makes sense for some of the larger ad formats is also in question. So we're very interested in it. It's critical for us to understand viewability so that we're not wasting dollars, but we're making progress, but not quite there.
But it sounds like those are largely the technical issues of how to
Yes.
deliver it accurately, but
Yeah.
the industry's largely figured out how to integrate it into business. Is that fair to say?
Well, I would say that once the technical issues are solved and people are more comfortable with the accuracy of the data, then I think it will flow more into all the processes and negotiations.
Okay. Okay, great. So I want to go back to the engagement issues, and Andy, I'll start with you. You're looking at all these new platforms, all these new mechanisms for communicating with your consumers, and there must be hundreds that you look at in your role, and each one has a different type of different type of engagement payoff with the consumer. Walk us through how you deal with that and how you think about the value of one versus another and investment in one versus the other.
Yeah. So, I've been through this on the B2C side at my role at Kraft, but prior to this, and I'm on it, I have a different lens this time through from more of a B2B perspective, although we have obviously some B2C clients. And fundamentally, a behavior has a value. And so what is that behavior worth to you? So is it a dealer locator? Is it a store finder? Is it to make a purchase? Is it to have a salesperson call you? Is it to sign up for a newsletter? And to score those behaviors, I think, is the first critical component. So you say to a business, what behaviors in your digital world will go back and compel management to give you more money, right? If it's a view, if you have some econometrics kind of view of the world on your website, and X amount of views equals more volume, then that's an easy task to accomplish. If it is more about the specific tasks that are more indicative of intent to purchase or the actual act of purchasing, then it becomes easier to focus those kind of tasks based on what those platforms can deliver. So there are no shortage of ad networks. There's no shortage of great places to go and advertise, contextually, relevance-wise, absolutely no shortage of things to do. The question is, what are the things, what successes have those platforms had in driving those high-value tasks? And I don't think that there's going to be one platform that is necessarily the answer. I think our goal is to say, if we want dealer locator as the principal high-value task, that what we're going to go after, and because that's the thing that appliances can then take up the ladder to management and say, you need to invest more money in digital, then that's the place, then that's the type of high-value task that we're not only going to put on our website, but we're going to distribute. We're going to distribute it on Facebook. We're going to distribute in ads. We're going to distribute it in a number of different social environments that allow us to kind of make that happen. And I think part of that issue that it is an adjacency to is brand as a content publisher, businesses as publishers. And so when you are building content, the money comes from somewhere else. And usually it comes from ad dollars. It comes out of a general marketing pool. And so this issue around content, especially in the realm of social, I think becomes an even more critical point. How do you kind of take those dollars, which are advertising, even though it's content, and make it part of that equation? And I think that fundamentally takes the GRP discussion and just kind of, does the Ginza knife thing to it. And so I think, we have so how do you kind of make all of that stuff into irrelevant? And what I think, or make it relevant, and I think what cuts through are the behaviors. What cuts through are the what we call high-value tasks. Stole it from one place, brought it to another place, that term. But those tasks are what are critical in a digital world.
And so you brought up the issue of kind of owned media as opposed to paid media. Is that a whole different ballgame, or can you apply the same logic, the same rationale and framework?
I think so. If engagement is what is valuable,
Yep.
Right? What do you want people to do? You want them to share it. Those things apply, whether it's on paid, earned, shared, or owned. We get business leads through LinkedIn, right? We get business leads through Facebook. We get, customer service issues resolved through Facebook. There's lots of different ways to think about how those things happen. Those are critical points of behavior that you can kind of take to task and distribute via an ad banner, right? Via any kind of outdoor experience or in-store experience, I think all of that's in play. So I think you can take those precepts and distribute them widely across paid, earned, shared, owned.
Okay, great. Terry, would love to hear your thoughts on how you sort of bring together those traditional frameworks and these new inputs, these new kind of, hundreds and hundreds of ways of looking at engagement.
Right. And yeah, and we also look at high value tasks and behaviors, and we have new metrics even now that we're working on. So for example, for Twitter, for example, looking at creating new indices that enable us to indicate combining things like retweets per 100 followers and shares and different items into some types of standard indices. Same things for behaviors on Facebook, behaviors on our sites, our client sites. So a high value action, as Andy mentioned, whether it's viewing a recipe or watching a video, all of those items are things that we're measuring and tracking and then trying to correlate in the end to either a brand impact or some type of transaction or ROI.
So each one of them gets assigned some sort of outcome value.
Yeah. And in some cases, we're capturing it and then trying to model against it. In other cases, we're estimating, and doing some weighting based on our estimates until we can prove it out.
And that type of weighting, do you use that to ascribe value to think about price of media, or is that used to pick which medium we're going to use?
Right. Well, it's been more lately about optimizing, your overall investment on the campaign. So whether it's which advertising vehicle is driving people to do more high-value actions. So it could be a metric to say that this particular medium was more successful in driving the values, or it could be that understanding that this video is driving more of a brand impact. So it's both. It's driving you to what you're engaging in and measuring how the value of the thing you're engaging in.
Great.
It would seem that as a mechanism for creating some standards, there are certainly things that are behavior based that probably can become standards versus a GRP or an impression, right? A dealer locator, a social share, a +1, whatever it is. There are probably a set of actions and behaviors that are standard across everyone's website, standard across every kind of digital environment that exists. And I think if you could assign value to those at a macro level, you could start to see new forms of standards start to evolve. And I think that's where an association like the ARF could really play a really significant role.
Yeah, I mean, but when you think about it, I mean, I think we're all talking about, at least in the online DR world, it's multi-touch attribution is the equivalent of this.
Right.
Media mix modeling in kind of the TV world is actually effectively just multi-touch attribution. It's not doing it at an individual level, but it's certainly trying to assign impact to different types of behaviors. I think finding those step points that may be leading to that final conversion are good kind of proxy measures, but I mean, ultimately it's about actually kind of building up this understanding of a consumer and saying, here are all the touch points that you had, and then attributing value to all of those touch points across not just online, across all the different media that they end up consuming. And if you think about the world as it's gonna, it'll exist in 5-10 years, we're certainly going to have a lot of data that will allow us to understand all those touch points, and we'll be able to build these attribution models. I think one thing that's important, though, to remember is that we have to be really careful about all those attributions, giving it to that, in the online world, it's last click attribution or last fan attribution. The default, the place that marketers always want to go is to that easiest metric, which always feels it's the last thing that happened before I bought. But we all know that that's not how exactly. We know that maybe they get a disproportionate share, maybe they don't, who knows? But to be in this world where we kind of say that most of the value or all the value goes to that last click, it kind of does a disservice to all of that marketing that actually led to that event. And so I think, you know, in terms of the ARF's kind of role in this, I think being really kind of prescriptive, like this is how to think about multi-touch and across mediums as well, and trying to help describe that. So
Great.
Yeah, I'd build on that, and I think you know, there's a real convergence out there between the mixed modeling at the macro level and kind of, you know, the online digital attribution at the micro level. And I think the concept of engagement in both of those pieces is definitely something that I think there's a lot of methodological enhancements to go across platform to incorporate kind of the best of breed metrics really for your entire campaign. I get really excited when I think about that potential and then the role of the ARF. But also, I get excited going back to the engagement piece for a second. When I think of platforms like YouTube and what we've done with things like skippable ads, with our TrueView product, where essentially you're changing the dynamic, not only for the advertiser from an efficiency perspective, but also for the consumer, to give the consumer the choice to opt out of a particular ad and skip an ad, and or if they see it, what we've seen is that sometimes the effective frequency goes down to a 1. So you don't have to spend the time and effort to go keep on increasing frequency out there. I think that's a real potential as well, that as we look at the potential of digital, we look at consumer choice and ad preferences and kind of take that in combination with, again, the macro level mix model, the micro level attribution model. I think that's a really, really robust set of information that, you know, we definitely see a real opportunity for some innovation in the future.
Great. So we're going to open up to questions in just a second. So go ahead and come up to the mic if you'd like to ask the panelists something. While we're doing that, let me ask you guys, you talked about this past year as being a really kind of pivotal year for digital. So what's 2013 all about? What are you guys focused on? Brad, you can start.
Well, I think I talked about a lot in at least my talk. It's about reach and frequency measures. You know, again, to David's point, actually, he started thinking more and more about the consumer and all the media that they're consuming and managing reach and frequency across all of those. That's kind of our real focus for the year.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd build on that. I think there's definitely, you know, as we provide our own solutions, but also actively work with the industry to build the third-party infrastructure for both, again, the publishers and advertisers. I think the whole concept of see, think, and do, you know, we're really focused on viewable impressions and GRPs first. I think we recently announced some new pieces around brand lift that I get really excited about, and kind of doing that in a really consumer-friendly way where there's a direct value, and we see great results and better response rates as a result. I think the other piece that we haven't talked about yet is the whole mobile piece. And I think mobile for us is obviously more than just a passing fancy. We definitely have a strong interest in this one, and really we look at a lot of innovations to come with new ways to look at really the locational context of your phone in context of your daily life. And things like, you know, what we've seen with Google Now, not only be able to understand that context, but being able to predict what you're going to do next and really serve as your personal assistant. That's a future we get really excited about, and that's where I really think there's some focus for us.
Okay.
Well, I think there are a lot of different things, you know, this year. One being certainly using when the modifications are made and enhancements are made for GRPs and viewability, continuing to really roll that out this year. Attribution is another area where we're very focused on not just digital attribution, but cross-channel attribution, particularly, you know, how do you measure when you have direct mail and TV and digital and, you know, attributing to the right one. And then combining that with a value-based optimization for acquisition. So if we want to, we don't want to just optimize acquisition, but we want to optimize acquisition of high-value customers. So that means being able to take your, you know, previously you would put your source of customer in your database and look at their value over time and then try to find more people like them. Now you have multiple sources of attribution, so then how do you associate that value among the different sources? So we're working with partners as well to really come up with a value for each that they're providing, not just the acquisition. And then obviously our ongoing social and mobile efforts are this year with our Brand Live capability to be looking at real-time behavior in social and being able to respond to it is high priority for us, as well as being able to measure and optimize mobile. So
Great.
it's a lot.
Busy year. Andy.
Yeah, so I would say that, what social did to the world, 3 years ago, mobile is going to do to the world this year. I think it's going to be it's going to be an absolute unraveling of things that we know.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's going to, and I don't say that lightly because I guess it's job security, but it's also a little unnerving. If we see it, I'm sure everyone sees it, right? The number of searches that come through mobile has increased, right? The value of customers that view ads and come to us via an iPad versus an iPhone, you can see differences in the way those people come through. We talked about context before of mobile, of even watching TV, which is, of course, still incredibly powerful, but the fact that people are multitasking and they're watching Twitter while they're watching a TV show. And maybe they don't even have a cable box in their house anymore, they're just watching it on an iPad. So I think mobile and the context of which you watch and see things is incredibly compelling. The other thing is, there's this kind of component of real-time marketing and data. And I think it would be safe to say that, the people in this room have for a long time served as kind of the cornerstone of marketing decision-making, right? Based on ROI, based on outcomes that you guys can get from your advertising and your communications. But more than that is going to be the need for data scientists to really be able to uncover the underlying analytics. Where are sales triggers? Which contexts that you advertise in are the most compelling? How do you deliver the real right message to the right person at the right time? And I think that, so the data component of it, and as we think of traditional segmentation, I think is going to expand exponentially to the point where you won't make any decisions, creative or otherwise, without data. So I think data and UX become the cornerstones of all marketing organizations. Great. If they aren't already.
Excellent. Okay, can't see too well out there. Do we have, okay, question? Not yet. There you go.
Okay, great. First of all, I want to thank you all for a very rich and very valuable discussion. This has really been a great panel. I have a question specifically for Brad. Since you're from Facebook, which is a social network, as they say, I just thought it was really interesting and kind of ironic that your comments really focused on reach and frequency, but you never mentioned anything about the social mediation effects of advertising on Facebook or interacting on Facebook. So I was wondering if you could speak to that and what you've been doing and what you're seeing with that.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about that in the past. So whether it be social context that's associated with the actual message, the sharing, kind of the earned and the owned components, like all those are really important. But if you wrap them all up, those are just other creatives that are delivering reach and frequency. Some of them happen by paying us if they're paid ones, but if they're owned and earned ones, they happen for free. But it's still kind of wrapped into the same dynamic, which it's about putting messages in front of people. The ones that are earned through your friends happen to be probably more powerful than the ones that are purely paid. Well, not always, but like that's kind of how we think about it. So we have whole other presentations where we can talk about exactly how social context and all of those kind of social elements work, but it still kind of fits into this reach and frequency framework.
Okay.
I have a question on the global or international aspect of this. I assume most of what you've been talking about applies to the U.S. And do we see it playing out across all markets? Do we see it kind of lagging? Do we see each market needing different solutions?
Yeah, so I think that globalization is a great question. Obviously, the U.S. market is definitely, in many ways, a little bit more advanced, but by the same token can serve as a precursor where I think globally, a lot of the measurement standards, through the third-party companies and even through a lot of our internally at Google is kind of extending that global presence. I think there's definitely almost a three-tier strategy of kind of, really the developed, the emerging, and different types of countries there, where we look at really the infrastructure out there and kind of the need to build that that maybe doesn't exist today. So, a lot of those pieces really help us focus on some of the core ad serving components of our business for Google in particular. But I think there's still a lot of work to do on just basic census level information through a lot of the developing countries in particular.
Okay, do we have time for one more? Okay, so let's do one more.
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, there we are.
Just speaking about reach and frequency, what time frame are you guys operating in? Monthly, weekly, daily? What exactly are you talking about?
Well, it depends on the campaign. If it's a product launch campaign, it's a very short life cycle, and then you'd control down to a week. Most of the campaigns that we're looking within the studies are kind of ongoing campaigns, and so they're in the month and a half range. And then the product purchase cycle, if it's CPG, is, call it 30, 60, 90 days after that. So I mean, it very much depends on the campaign. And it depends on kind of what they know. So I'm not sure if I answered, but.
So that was a quick one, so I'll sneak one final thing in. There's a lot of discussion this afternoon about getting the next generation of research leaders prepared to go. I'm sure you guys think about that, both with new talent and with your existing colleagues. This stuff we're talking about is very ad hoc and dynamic and fast-moving, hard to teach in a one-semester media course at NYU. How do you guys think about bringing your organizations along at this type of pace?
Yeah, I guess I'll go. I think that's definitely a piece. We see this as, ideally someday, you'll have a college course and it will include a lot of the basic media planning principles as they really look across channel, not only digital, but extended for really all media types. I think that's a piece that we get excited about, and we've actually worked hard within the industry to not only do inspirational pieces. We recently did a piece on rebriefing a lot of the historical kind of major ad campaigns, for advertisers like Coke, that get really excited when you bring those online and kind of incorporate some of the best of what offline has to offer too. I think I'd be remiss in saying though that at Google we definitely take a really core view on trying to build up the next generation of leaders, and so much so that you'll see a new movie from us coming out this summer called The Internship, which will be a great way to kind of poke a little humor at that. So that'll be fun.
All right.
I think Andy said something though that I think is really important. The data scientists,
yeah.
Like one of the things that is I think often left behind when you think about traditional research is the data scientists and the massive amounts of new data that are kind of coming online. And so as an industry, we need to do better about kind of bringing those into the discussion around research because it is changing a little bit as this mass data becomes available.
Yeah, so I would agree with what he said about what I said.
I just you're right.
So I think that's right. I think from an organizational standpoint, what we're doing within GE is very enabled by what I would consider to be a completely visionary CMO in Beth Comstock. And she encourages us to kind of create this sense of entrepreneurial spirit and leadership within the organization. So is it the year of testing? I think it will always be the year of testing. Mm-hmm. So I think what you're trying to drive through an organization is this sense of you either believe the model works, where you take this data that exists today and you put it into the black box and out spits the outcome, or you believe that fundamentally something is a little bit off, that you really can't necessarily account for the complete fragmentation of dollars into social, into content, and into different types of engagement that's existed. And what are you going to do to kind of fix that model? And so, we talked about a couple of things that could be done today, but I think from an organizational standpoint, data, entrepreneurial kind of spirit, and in the sense of experimenting, and really content. Content is the cornerstone of all things digital. and every medium is digital.
All right, we are out of time. Please, round of applause for our fantastic group of panelists.